Even as I listen to you, I'm just thinking to myself, that is one hell of a test that you have faced up to. A real existential moment. You know something deep about yourself that most of us will never know. How you react to the most fundamental threat. Does that make you in some senses, maybe proud's the wrong word, but feel more at one with yourself?
You know, I found out a great deal about myself, I guess, no question, in many ways.
Did you like what you found out?
I feel that there was, I did have, to be honest, more strength than I thought that I might. And you know, one of the Beirut hostages, Terry Waite, sent a message which amazingly I heard on the radio that I had, and he said the mind and the body are extraordinary things, and you will find more strength than you might believe. And I think that's true of absolutely, of many of us. And a thing that I kept holding in my head was that today and every day around the world there are people who are tragically being told that they have they have cancer or some kind of illness, that they're not going to survive 9 months, 18 months, whatever. And occasionally you meet somebody in that predicament, and very often they're going to their certain death with a degree of calm and dignity. And it seemed that I, on the other hand, was much of the time just waiting for my life to really begin again. And that's a lesser challenge. And it seemed that I really needed to try to bring calm and dignity to that process.
Loneliness obviously is an issue. From reading about the circumstances of your early captivity, you were in a blank sort of room, a couple of plastic chairs, a narrow bed. You didn't have radio or TV. You got it later, but at the beginning you didn't have it. You didn't even have a wristwatch. Now, when you have the bad thoughts and the despair that you talked about, what did you hang on to? What were the thoughts that were most prominent in your head?
You know, when you could feel the dark thoughts taking a grip of you, then you had to, those are loose emotions in a way, and I felt that I had to apply kind of reason and logic in the battle to control those rising fears and anxieties and areas of despair. And there was that continual battle. There was a window in the wall of my second cell, and I almost used to stack up almost physically on one side of that window the negative things, the things that could drive me down. Worries about my parents, regret that I had taken the risks that I had, and this close to despair at the idea that I might be there possibly for years. You just didn't know at that point. Worry that I just might not survive it, never see the people I loved again. That was all on one side of the window. On the other side of the window, there were the more positive aspects of my predicament, such as they were, and they were that I hadn't been killed in the way that some people are in Iraq. I wasn't being tortured. I was being reasonably well fed. This was Gaza, a place where I knew that deals could sometimes be made in the darkest moments. That there was a lot to hang on to, and I tried to almost physically move my mind as I paced up and down from one side of the window to the other. And there were a whole range of psychological devices and quests in myself for inspiration, other people that I'd read about or known about or was hearing about on the radio. Some really powerful reporting on the World Service from Eastern Congo, where you heard of extraordinary levels of suffering. One woman talking about being raped countless times and then being forced to kill her own child. And in comparison with that, I felt that I was having it so very much easier. In the kind of annals of human incarceration, mine, it wasn't Abu Ghraib, it wasn't the Gulag, it wasn't certainly Auschwitz. People were getting through those kind of places, and I just felt that I must, and that I could. Not long before I went in, a friend of mine had told me about how her father had survived Auschwitz and then married a German woman in the years afterwards. And that's colossal, you know, that there are people you know of, people you've read of, and you just feel that to give up under the pressures that I had would have been shameful. That was one of the devices.
Shameful.
There's a way you have to see yourself in life. I was conscious always that I was facing really the biggest test of my life to this point, and whether I responded to that challenge well or badly, I knew I would always measure myself to a degree on it. I would know that in Gaza big questions were asked.
Did you also reflect on your past life? Because it seems to me it's not an accident that Alan Johnston was in Gaza. You'd taken various decisions in your journalistic life which perhaps most people wouldn't take. Going to Uzbekistan first, then going to Afghanistan, then deciding that you wanted to spend years in Gaza. These are very particular decisions. I don't want to sound like a cod psychologist, but some would say they're the decisions of a man who wants to keep on the move, who doesn't want to sort of commit to settle down. Did you reflect on that?
I did. I spent a lot of time wondering quite why I've lived my life in that way. It's a huge thing, and amazing that until that point I hadn't really taken my mind apart and wondered why. And I guess the very first time I went to a place like that was in Nagorno-Karabakh, and I think at that very earlier stage I was just drawn by a huge curiosity about what a conflict zone would be like. And I remember the first days there thinking, these people are determined to fight and die and kill other people in this situation. And that seemed, I was kind of learning about the nature of war and conflict and so on, but within days I really think that I had grasped the tragic waste of that situation. But from then on it did seem quite important to be in places experiencing that kind of intensity. It seemed that in those kind of places the journalism that I did was always well worth doing. They were always places that were coming apart, and the world beyond needed to know more about them. And I genuinely believe I was driven quite a lot centrally by that. It seemed like I
just want to test you on this, even at the expense of your personal life. It's clear you have an extraordinarily strong relationship with your parents. You have a strong relationship with your home in Scotland and with the BBC in the UK. You have a very strong network of friends, but you consistently through your life have left that behind.
The risks in those places are often feel rather more than they are on the ground. When you're actually there, you don't always feel you're in great danger, and the longer you're there you hope you can manage the dangers as well. You always do imagine that you are going to come back, and the risks, such as they were, simply did seem worth taking. I guess I became more experienced of working and living and being in those places, and it just did seem the right place for me to be. I guess when I was at journalism college, when I was very much younger, I did imagine that was what journalism would mean to a large extent for me, being in those kind of places.